Right, said Sergeant Colon. This, then, is your truncheon, also nomenclatured your nightstick, or baton of office. He paused while he tried to remember his army days, and brightened up. And you will look after it, he shouted. You will eat with it. You will sleep with it. You...
Excuse me.
Who said that?
Down here. It's me, Lance Constable Cuddy.
Yes, Pilgrim?
How do we eat with it, Sergeant?
Sergeant Colon's wound-up machismo wound down. He was suspicious of Lance Constable Cuddy. He strongly suspected Lance Constable Cuddy was a troublemaker.
What?
Well, do we use it as a knife, or a fork, or cut in half for chopsticks, or what?
What are you talking about?
Excuse me, Sergeant.
What is it, Lance Constable Angua?
How exactly do we sleep with it, sir?
Well, I meant... Corporal Nobbs, stop that sniggering right now!
Colon adjusted his breastplate and decided to strike out in a new direction.
Now, what we have here is a puppet, muppet, or effigy,
indicating a vaguely humanoid shape made of leather and stuffed with straw, mounted on a stake.
Called by the nickname of Hotter, weapons training for the use of. Forward, Lance Constable Angua! Tell me, Lance Constable, do you think you could kill a man?
How long will I have? There was a pause while they picked up Corporal Nobbs and patted him on the back until he settled down.
Very well, said Sergeant Colon. What you must do now is take your truncheon like so, and on the command 1, proceed smartly to Hother, and on the command 2, tap him smartly upon the bounce. 1, 2...
The truncheon bounced off Arthur's helmet.
Very good. Only one thing wrong. Anyone tell me what it was?
They shook their heads.
From behind,
said Sergeant Colon.
You hit him from behind. No sense in risking trouble, is there? Now, you have a go, Lance Constable Cuddy.
But, Sarge...
Do it?
They watched. Perhaps we could fetch him a chair? Said Angua after an embarrassing 15 seconds. Detritus sniggered.
I'm too little to be a guard,
he said. Lance Constable Cuddy stopped jumping up and down.
Sorry, Sergeant, he said. This isn't how dwarves do it, see?
It's how guards do it,
said Sergeant Colon.
All right, Lance Constable Detritus, don't salute. You give it a try.
Detritus held the truncheon between what must technically be called thumb and forefinger, and smashed it over Arthur's helmet. He stared reflectively at the truncheon stump. Then he bunched up his, for want of a better word, fist, and hammered Arthur over what was briefly its head until the stake was driven 3 feet into the ground.
Now the dwarf, he can have a go,
he said. There was another embarrassed 5 seconds. Sergeant Colon cleared his throat.
Well, yes, I think we can consider him thoroughly apprehended, he said. Make a note, Corporal Nobbs. Lance Constable Detritus, don't salute. Deducted $1 for loss of truncheon, and you're supposed to be able to ask them questions afterwards.
He looked at the remains of Arthur.
I think around about now is a good time to demonstrate the fine points of hotchery, he said.
Elsewhere, Lady Sybil Ramkin looked at the sad strip of leather that was all that remained of the late Chubby. Who'd do something like this to a poor dragon, she said.
We're trying to find out, said Vimes. We think maybe he was tied up next to a wall and exploded.
Carrot leaned over the wall of a pen. Coochie coochie coo, he said. A friendly flame took his eyebrows off. I mean, he was as tame as anything, said Lady Ramkin. Wouldn't hurt a fly. Poor little thing.
How could someone make a dragon blow up, said Vimes. Could you do it by giving it a kick?
Oh, yes, said Sybil. You'd lose your leg, mind you.
Then it wasn't that. Any other way, so you wouldn't get hurt?
Not really. It'd be easier to make it blow itself up. Really, Sam, I don't like talking about...
I have to know.
Well, at this time of year, the males fight. Make themselves look big, you know? That's why I always keep them apart. Vimes shook his head. There was only one dragon, he said. Behind them, Carrot leaned over the next pen, where a pear-shaped male dragon opened one eye and glared at him. "Who's a good boy, then?" murmured Carrot. "I'm sure I've got a bit of coal somewhere." The dragon opened the other eye, blinked, and then was fully awake and rearing up. Its ears flattened, its nostrils flared, its wings unfurled, it breathed in. From its stomach came the gurgle of rushing acids as sluices and valves were opened. Its feet left the floor, its chest expanded. Vimes hit Carrot at waist height, bearing him to the ground. In its pen, the dragon blinked. The enemy had mysteriously gone, scared off. It subsided, blowing off a huge flame. Vimes unclasped his hands from his head and rolled over. "What'd you do that for, Captain?" said Carrot. "I wasn't—" "It was attacking a dragon," shouted Vimes. "One that wouldn't back down." He pulled himself to his knees and tapped Carrot's breastplate. "You polished that up real bright," he said. "You can see yourself in it. So can anything else." "Oh, yes, of course there's that," said Lady Sybil. "Everyone knows you should keep dragons away from mirrors." "Mirrors," said Carrot. "Hey, there were bits of—" "Yes, you showed Chubby a mirror," said Vimes. "The poor little thing must have been trying to make himself bigger than himself," said Carrot. "We're dealing here," said Vimes, "with a twisted mind." "Oh, no. You think so?" "Yes. But no, you can't be right, because Nobby was with us all the time." "Not Nobby," said Vimes testily. "Whatever he might do to a dragon, I doubt if he'd make it explode. There's stranger people in this world than Corporal Nobbs, my lad." Carrot's expression slid into a rictus of intrigued horror. "Gosh," he said. Elsewhere, Sergeant Colin surveyed the butts. Then he removed his helmet and wiped his forehead. "I think perhaps Lance Constable Angua shouldn't have another go with the longbow until we've worked out how to stop her getting in the way." "Sorry, Sergeant." They turned to Detritus, who was standing sheepishly behind a heap of broken longbows. Crossbows were out of the question. They sat in his massive hands like a hairpin. In theory, the longbow would be a deadly weapon in his hands, just as soon as he mastered the art of when to let go. Detritus shrugged.
"Sorry, mister," he said. "Bows aren't troll weapon."
"Ha!" said Colin. "As for you, Lance Constable Cuddy—"
Just can't get the hang of aiming, Sergeant.
"I thought dwarves were famous for their skills in battle."
Yeah, but not these skills, said Cuddy.
"Ambush,"
murmured Detritus. Since he was a troll, the murmur bounced off distant buildings. Cuddy's beard bristled.
"You devious troll, I get my—"
"Round up,"
said Sergeant Colin quickly.
"I think we'll stop trading, yeah. You'll have to sort of pick it up as you go along, all right?"
He sighed. He was not a cruel man, but he'd been either a soldier or a guard all his life, and he was feeling put upon. Otherwise, he wouldn't have said what he said next.
"I don't know, I really don't. Fighting among yourselves, smashing your own weapons. I mean, who do we think we're fooling? Now, it's nearly noon. You take a few hours off. We'll see you again tonight, if you think it's worth turning up."
There was a spang noise. Cuddy's crossbow had gone off in his hand. The bolt whiffled past Corporal Nobb's ear and landed in the river, where it stuck.
"Sorry," said Cuddy.
"Tisk, tisk,"
said Sergeant Colin. That was the worst part. It would have been better all around if he'd called the dwarf some names. It would have been better if he'd made it seem that Cuddy was worth an insult. He turned around and walked off towards Pseudopolis' yard. They heard his muttered comment.
"What him say?"
said Detritus. "A fine body of men," said Angua, going red. Cuddy spat on the ground, which didn't take long on account of its closeness. Then he reached under his cloak and produced, like a conjurer extracting a size 10 rabbit from a size 5 hat, his double-headed battle-axe, and started to run. By the time he reached the virginal target, he was a blur. There was a rip, and the dummy exploded like a nuclear haystack. The other two wandered up and inspected the result, as pieces of chaff gently drifted to the ground. "Yes, all right," said Angua, "but he did say you're supposed to be able to ask them questions afterwards." "He didn't say they've got to be able to answer them," said Cuddy grimly.
Lance Constable Cuddy, deduct $1 for target,
said Detritus, who already owed $11 for bows.
If it's worth turning up,
said Cuddy, losing the axe somewhere about his person again.
Speciest.
I don't think he meant it that way, said Angua.
Oh, it's all right for you, said Cuddy.
Why?
'Cause you a man,
said Detritus. Angua was bright enough to pause for a moment to think this over. A woman, she said.
Same thing.
Only in broad terms. Come on, let's go and have a drink. The transient moment of camaraderie in adversity completely evaporated.
Drink with a troll?
Drink with a dwarf?
All right, said Angua. How about you and you coming and having a drink with me? Angua removed her helmet and shook out her hair. Female trolls don't have hair, although the more fortunate ones are able to cultivate a fine growth of lichen, and a female dwarf is more likely to be complimented on the silkiness of her beard than on her scalp. But it was just possible the sight of Angua scraped little sparks of some shared, ancient, cosmic maleness. I haven't really had a chance to look around, she said, but I saw a place in Gleam Street, which meant that they had to cross the river, at least two of them trying to indicate to passers-by that they weren't with at least one of the other two, which meant that, with desperate nonchalance, they were looking around, which meant that Cuddy saw the dwarf in the water. If you could call it water. If you could still call it a dwarf. They looked down.
You know,
said Detritus after a while,
that looked like that dwarf who make weapons in Rhyme Street.
Bjorn Hammerhawk?
said Cuddy.
That the one, yeah.
It looks a bit like him,
Cuddy conceded, still talking in a cold, flat voice.
But not exactly like him.
What do you mean? said Angua.
Because Mr. Hammerhawk, said Cuddy, didn't have such a great big hole where his chest should be.
Elsewhere. Doesn't he ever sleep? thought Vimes. Doesn't the bloody man ever get his head down? Isn't there a room somewhere with a black dressing gown hanging on the door? He knocked on the door of the oblong office.
Ah, Captain,
said the patrician, looking up from his paperwork.
You were commendably quick.
Was I?
You got my message?
said Lord Vetinari. No, sir. I've been occupied.
Indeed. And what could occupy you?
Someone has killed Mr. Hammerhawk, sir. A big man in the dwarf community. He's been shot with something, some kind of siege weapon or something, and dumped in the river. We've just fished him out. I was on the way to tell his wife. I think he lives in Treacle Street. And then I thought, since I was passing,
this is very unfortunate.
Certainly it was for Mr. Hammerhawk, said Vimes. The patrician leaned back and stared at Vimes.
Tell me,
he said,
how was he killed?
I don't know. I've never seen anything like it. There was just a great big hole, but I'm going to find out what it was.
Did I mention that Dr. Crucius came to see me this morning?
No, sir.
He was very concerned.
Yes, sir.
I think you upset him.
Sir?
The patrician seemed to be reaching a decision. His chair thumped forward. Captain Vimes.
Sir?
I know you are retiring the day after tomorrow and feel, therefore, a little restless. But while you are captain of the Night Watch, I am asking you to follow two very specific instructions.
Sir?
You will cease any investigations connected with this theft from the Assassin's Guild. Do you understand? It is entirely guild business.
Sir.
Vimes kept his face carefully immobile. I'm choosing to believe that the unspoken word in that sentence was a yes, Captain.
Sir.
And that one too. As for the matter of the unfortunate Mr. Hammerhawk, the body was discovered just a short while ago.
Yes, sir.
Then it's out of your jurisdiction, Captain.
What? Sir?
The Day Watch can deal with it.
But we've never bothered with that hours of daylight jurisdiction stuff.
Nevertheless, in the current circumstances, I shall instruct Captain Quirk to take over the investigation, if it turns out that one is necessary.
If one is necessary. If people don't end up with half their chests gone by accident. Meteorite strike, perhaps, thought Vimes.
He took a deep breath
and leaned on the patrician's desk. "Mayonnaise Quirk couldn't find his arse with an atlas, and he's got no idea about how to talk to dwarfs. He calls them gritsuckers. My men found the body. It's my jurisdiction." The patrician glanced at Vimes' hands. Vimes removed them from the desk, as if it had suddenly grown red-hot. "Night Watch. That's what you are, Captain. Your writ runs in the hours of darkness." "It's dwarves we're talking about. If we don't get it right, they'll take the law into their own hands. That usually means chopping the head off the nearest troll. And you'll put Quirk on this?" "I've given you an order, Captain." "But you may go." "You can't." "I said you may go, Captain Vimes." "Sir." Vimes saluted. Then he turned about and marched out of the room. He closed the door carefully, so that there was barely a click. The patrician heard him thump the wall outside. Vimes wasn't aware, but there were a number of barely perceptible dents in the wall outside the oblong office, their depths corresponding to his emotional state at the time. By the sound of it, this one would need the services of a plasterer. Lord Vetinari permitted himself a smile, although there was no humor in it. The city operated. It was a self-regulating college of guilds, linked by the inexorable laws of mutual self-interest, and it worked. On average, by and large, overall, normally. The last thing you needed was some watchman blundering around upsetting things like a loose siege catapult. Normally. Vimes seemed in a suitable emotional state. With any luck, the orders would have the desired effect.